Hi everybody and welcome to Homeschool from Homebuilding and Renovating, and this is the Home Design Workshop. Now over the next half an hour, what we're looking to try and do is get to the bottom of really good best practice when it comes to house design, using house designers for people who want to build and renovate their own home, but also hopefully some good insight into some really clever house design techniques and the kind of things that you might want to put in the houses that you're going to build and renovate once we finally come out of the lockdown process. So with good house design in mind, I've been more than honoured to get the time of two of Britain's best known, best skilled and best loved, I think it's fair to say, house designers and people who really specialise in providing a great service for individual self-builders and renovators, Allan Corfield and Pete Tonks. So I'll let you guys introduce yourself if that's okay. Allan first.
Thanks, Jason. My name is Allan Corfield. I'm Director of AC Architects. We've completed about 340 one-off low-energy self-build homes across the UK, and I also write and speak for Homebuilding Renovating magazine.
Pete.
Thank you, Allan. Good. Thank you, Jason. Pete Tonks from PJT Design. Been in the self-build sector since the mid-80s. Been self-employed since the early 2000s, specialising really in private one-off self-build homes. We do about 15 private homes a year through planning. And we also have a project management company as well. We're now building the houses that I get to design, which has always been a passion. So that's us.
Brilliant. And for full disclosure, these are two designers that I would very much use in my own projects as well. And in fact, I've used Pete to design the house I'm living in right now. And I've got to say, it's a brilliant success. So we're delighted with the services that we've had. And I think what I wanted to try and do is kind of share the insight that you guys have with our audience today. So I think first of all, and I think it's pretty fun to start with a nice, easy question really, but what kind of things are clients looking for now in houses, and what are the kind of those really up to the minute trends? So Allan first, if you could just think about kind of, what are those kind of go-to design features that you love to include at the moment?
I think a lot of our clients want to have good light and good space within their homes. So we're all used to living in cramped developer designed homes or built homes because they're not designed, where there's not huge volume or light coming into it. So a lot of our clients are drawn to, say, glazed gables, vaulted ceilings. These are a couple of elements that we try and add in where clients want them. Volume adds great feeling and joy to a space. So these are sort of quite high level things that we're looking and we get asked for regularly.
Space and light are really high on clients' wish lists now. It's all to do with kind of personal well-being, feeling good in the spaces within the home, and also allowing that connection for the family. But a big thing for us is like individuality, well-being. That leads on to a real sort of increase now for fitness gyms, yoga studios. Again, it's that space and light thing. Home offices more so than ever now. We are all working from home, whether we like it or not. And of course, we have to do that. A big thing again, prep kitchens. So all the work in the prep kitchen behind the scenes, and then into the family kitchen for the daytime activities. And another big thing for us at the moment is verandas, glazed links, connecting buildings. It's kind of passing through the spaces, enjoying the spaces, which goes back to what Allan says about the basics of light and well-being. So again, personalising for the client.
I think that's a really good kind of summary of the classic house design features that we kind of see in the magazines at the moment. And I think one of the things I think about a lot, and somebody's really enjoyed living in an individually designed house that took us years really to kind of afford to build and get built, was actually this is a house that we're going to want to stay in for years to come. And I think a lot of people dream of building or renovating their house, and it's, for many people, it's a once in a lifetime kind of experience. And I'm kind of naturally quite cynical of trends and naturally very cynical of fashions. And I think when I think about design, that's something that often happens, So you only need to look in Ideal Home magazine from the 1970s to kind of see avocado suites and that kind of stuff. So the one thing I really aspire to is sort of timeless style and timeless kind of trends. So Allan, kind of, obviously, things like small kitchens are a bit of a thing of the past, really. But how do you ensure that the design that you're coming up with in 2020 is going to be relevant to you living there in 2040, hopefully?
Yeah, I think that comes from the start of the design process and really finding out what the client wants now, where they see themselves in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And that's all part of that sort of really detailed brief process that we need to know that. They need to think about how they're going to use the space, having multi-purpose spaces. We have a need in the UK for multi-generational homes, forever homes, truly forever homes, not just the ability to put a stair lift in. We need to think about how we're designing the homes for, as I say, for us now, when if you're going to have a family, how does that change the dynamic? So it's rather than specific design ideas, I would look at that in the big picture of where you're going to be, how you see your family using that home.
And Pete, is that true for you too?
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that is absolutely true, isn't it? Is that the home is a stable entity once it's built, right? You're not going to want to necessarily kind of massively adapt to self-built home once you've spent all that money finishing it off. But obviously, our families change and grow and leave the nest, and and all those kind of things change in our lives. So how do you make sure that is okay? How do you make sure that you're happy in your home in 20 years' time?
Again, I agree with Allan, but for me, it's all about good spatial flow in the building. So whatever family is using it, it needs to have a good spatial flow. It needs to have connectivity between floors, visions between spaces. For any family, that would be a positive thing. But also, it's about the site context. The context of that home at a particular place will always be successful. Doesn't matter who's using it; it has a connection with its place. Allan will know this from the many homes that he does across the country. Likewise, we design across the whole country. So it's about anybody can build a building, but it takes a specialist team and a specialist mind to create a home at a certain place, and that will always be successful. And of course, orientation and views as well. They're specific to a site, and therefore will be beneficial to that home.
And is that true as well of materials, Pete? I mean, I think kind of designers have a big say in the kind of external materials of a house. And obviously we've seen an awful lot of change in that I've been involved in it for just over 20 years now, not quite as long as you, but not far off. And I think, you do see those kind of changing trends in materials usage as well, don't you?
You do indeed. And it's great that we are now a design-led society. So everybody out there appreciates good, honest materials. So, timber should be good timber, metal should be good metal, and bricks should be made from clay or from the local, from the local materials. So there is a much, much wider appreciation of materials. Thank you to obviously magazines like HB&R, and the stuff you do online. So everybody gets it, everybody enjoys the materials now. It's not just a way of finishing a building, it's something to enjoy.
So talking about, the bad things that we've seen, and I think, everybody's got their own kind of personal pet hates, I think, in terms of design. I mean, Allan, I just kind of think, in terms of the houses that, you might have seen on estates, or even, dare I say, some poorly designed individual self-built homes, because the terrible truth actually is that self-builders do build some pretty awful homes as well as some really nice ones. So what are the bad ones you've seen, and why are they bad?
I think rather than going into naming and shaming or going through bad design things, the big mistakes that we see or we hear of, or when I do the Ask the Expert at the magazine, we get to see other people's designs. It's architects, designers, technicians, whoever it may be, not listening to the client, forgetting that it's not their home, they're designing it for somebody else and their requirements, and budget. I'm sick of seeing things that have got planning, building regs, we're about to pick our contractors, and suddenly it's 150, 200,000 pounds too expensive. These are things that shouldn't happen on any estate, regardless of how it looks. If it looks bad and the client's happy with it, some people would argue, well, that's still a success for that client. So these are my big bugbears.
Okay, and well, let's get into that a bit more then, because that is what I always call that the kind of the grand designs process mistake a little bit, and it's what makes that TV show very successful and fun to watch, if you like that kind of thing, which is effectively down, I think, to the kind of separation of buildability and design. And my take on it really is I think a lot of people just view design as a process of designing a nice house, as opposed to a kind of full service design, which talks about engineering and costs and the actual buildability element of it. So, is that why does it happen so much? And you're right. When we run that Ask the Experts kind of clinic at the shows, it's the number one problem, isn't it? It's kind of, we're dead excited about the house. We've kind of got talked into this massive budget by the designer anyway, and then we've gone out to contractors. Actually, it's even twice what the designer kind of talked us into. So why does that happen? What's the actual flaw in the process?
I think my take on that is there's two things. One, did the architect designer actually ask the budget? Did the clients work out the budget? It's one thing knowing budgets are twofold. It's I have X amount of money, but when can I get that in cash flow? So it's a grand design's dream that they run out of money. They've still got the right amount of money, but they run out during the process. So there's that budgeting exercise that's not done properly. And some designers, a lot of designers, architects, technicians only do the pretty picture at the front. They're not seeing their projects right the way through to on-site completion. Pete's in a perfect place for actually seeing his projects through and being the project manager side of it. So he's got to make sure that what he's designing can be built, because he's got to actually then follow through on it. But there's a massive problem of that people are doing nice, pretty pictures and then handing it off to a builder or another professional to try and see it through. And they've not got the experience or know-how to be taking into account budget and value engineering a project from day one.
But how does a designer, Pete, how does a designer kind of not necessarily know budgets? Is it just that they're not necessarily involved closely in the construction process? Or, as Allan kind of says, they effectively just design and then in a very isolated way, just hand that over to somebody else?
Yeah, I think from my experience, the self-build client is a very different client. It needs a much softer approach. It has to come from people with experience, like myself, like Allan, like all the guys that have done this for some time. The upper level architects are perhaps not quite tuned into the softness that's required with self-builders. They do need a completely different approach. So budget has to be asked from day one. It's the very first question we ask with any client. What is the budget? What is the working capital? As Allan says, we now get to deliver designs into actual buildings, and it's more obvious now than ever. The money, and I'm doing it myself, so I've run out of money 3 times on my project. That's a whole different story, and we probably haven't got time for that today. But yeah, you have to be sensible and practical, and you must know the budget. And the other key thing the problem I have with other designers is recycling designs from past projects for new clients. It's never going to work. It creates a house, but it hasn't delivered a personal home. So obviously, Allan, it does bespoke designs. I do bespoke designs, and that's a true design. So I never recycle. That's what I say.
Yeah, that speaks to something I think probably I'm slightly unfair on a lot of designers for, which is my general view of designers is that they've only really got about three ideas that they'll kind of put into every single house they can design. But maybe that's a bit unfair.
A little bit.
So, just going into a little bit more detail into that budget thing, because I think it is the number one thing that most people worry about. How, Allan, how do you keep in touch with, because obviously the importance of being able to design for budget and the secret of doing it well is that you understand what costs are as a designer. Yeah. So how do you keep in touch with costs? Is it because you just get out there and see loads of houses being built and know what the costs are, or what's the key to it?
I think a lot of it is it's experience, but it's wanting to know that part of the project as well. You can learn, you can do your own research, you can be quantity surveyors, will know the cost of everything down to the last nut and bolt. What quantity surveyors can't account for on self-build is the self-builder buying stuff on eBay at night or getting end of line things or whatever they're going to do. So that can become a challenge. But it's being involved, working with the kit companies, contractors, and seeing the projects right the way through, and then looking at it, assessing it. And one thing that we have to do, and we tell our clients this from day one, is we will challenge you on your budget. We can't design you your most efficient home at whatever the target budget is, and then them not appreciate that if they make it slightly bigger or a couple of 100 mil longer or whatever it's going to be, that changes the span and the efficiencies, that's obviously that's going to impact the budget. And when you are on a tight budget, you're not allowed to go and spend 25 grand on a fridge. Like you have to be realistic about things. So, but it's about challenging them. But you need to come from a point where you have done it and had the experience to then be able to challenge them on it. So that's a key thing.
And is that your take, Pete, too? That, I mean, I think from what Alan's described there, I think part of this is an element of, being not just a designer, but also almost like a kind of patriarchal or matriarchal kind of figure that kind of oversees these projects coming to fruition, really.
Yeah, I think the key word from Allan there was experience. If you're going to go and get a house designed by somebody, use somebody who's done that a lot of times before. It's a fact. It's anything, isn't it? If you go and get a suit, you're going to go and get measured. You're going to go to someone who makes really good suits that people love. That's where you want to go. You want to go to someone who has experience, not only in the design, as you say, in the end cost. How can we deliver that? What's on paper? How do we deliver that in budget? Fact.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. But I think I keep coming back to that idea of, I think my view on building and renovating houses actually these days is that it's got incredibly complicated for a lot of people, and I think, over the course of 20 years, the amount of tech and the amount of materials choices available, the amount of, you just look at things like energy efficiency alone, it must be very difficult for designers to keep on top of all that. And I think, as self-builders and speaking for the self-build audience, we've probably got an over-ambitious expectation of what designers can do, in that, we go to them and expect them to design, a near passive house with the latest materials, and we expect our designers to source all that for us and understand the tech of it. And I think, my impression actually is that, the amount of people that we need to use these days, the amount of experts that we need to use has increased massively. And, I just kind of think of, kind of energy efficient design and the kind of the issues of that. And Pete, I mean, you've designed some incredibly energy efficient houses in the past, but it must be very difficult for you to keep on top of best practice, what the latest tech is. And I guess you get asked from your clients about stuff like heating systems, which, you're not really necessarily qualified to advise on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we have a really good network of people around us. So I never professed to be good at everything. Far from it. I was only ever good at drawing, to be fair. That's why I made a living out of it. But if I get asked questions that I don't know the answers to, I've got everybody in place who will give us the right answers and will present options to the client. So it is it's far more complex process today. Yeah.
And that's the key, Alan, isn't it? I think where people get into really bad situations as self-builders with designers is where the designers have almost overstretched themselves. I mean, I've got loads of anecdotes locally, but one anecdote where basically the designer had kind of had a go at designing a kind of swimming pool, kind of in a kind of compartmentalized basement. It was kind of part basement, hidden construction effectively. Contractor built it to the spec. It was just a complete disaster, really, and it started leaking from day one, and it's kind of, everybody started blaming each other. As I see it, the problem there sometimes is that the designers just think they know what they're doing sometimes and aren't willing to outsource it. So presumably, Alan, you use experts as well, and you've got a lot of engineering people on the team there.
Yeah, I mean, we've got all our staff or all of our team have got a basic or pretty good knowledge on fabric first, passive house, the different types of construction method the modern construction methods that we specialise in. But as soon as it becomes out of their liability, it will be passed on to our team of our network of people that we use. And they're mostly guys and girls that go to the shows that are the leaders in the fields that are wanting, again, as Pete touched on, the self-build audience is a different type of client. So we've got that level of people that we can trust that will come in, and a lot of it is about trust and being able to pass over your client to the right person to get the right advice, not purely to be sold to.
Yeah,
and that's a difficult thing.
Do you ever, Pete, turn down clients?
That sounds a bit harsh to turn down. I always look for a natural synchronicity with the client. So I have to be interested in the client. They have to be interested in what I do. To be honest with you, that works most of the time. I very rarely have a negative experience. We have lots of positive inquiries from really nice people with great plots. So luckily, we don't really turn a lot down. We do take a lot of nice work on. So
yeah, I guess the question was more really about, if you've got somebody coming to you with just completely unrealistic aims who are not willing to budge, it's a bit difficult, isn't it? Because obviously you're in a kind of client, kind of customer relationship rather than a kind of personal relationship where you can just not return their calls or split up with them. But it's, when it's a business relationship, it's very difficult to kind of say, well, actually, we can't help you anymore. And I guess, Allan, you must come across that quite a bit where people have got, big grand designs, as we might call them, and very small budgets.
I think we can, because of what we put online and our message and our sort of brand identity, the people are drawn to us. They want to work with us, and everything's on our website. So there's no hidden stuff about our fees or anything like that. So we're sort of pre-choosing them as we're going along or as they're coming in. But yeah, the main thing is usually the budget. If they've got a completely unrealistic budget, we will just say, well, we don't think that you can actually deliver, or we can deliver the design brief that you want on that budget. And that will naturally not happen, that relationship, because you're telling them something that they don't want to hear. So they'll either go and find somebody that's usually a hell of a lot cheaper that will just do it for the sake of doing it, or hopefully they'll realise that they need to readjust their budget, find more money, take more time, or change their project requirements.
Yeah, there's a question of sort of taking advice from people like you is not always easy, is it, for people, I think? And I just, a lot of people could kind of just have a very set attitude in terms of what they should pay a designer, what they should spend on their build. And if, they will eventually find somebody who will at least pretend to be able to deliver that for them, which must be frustrating, I guess, as a designer kind of speaking the truth, But I guess that comes down a little bit to the kind of thorny issue and a very controversial issue, I think, that's definitely worth addressing around, what you should pay for design. And I think my history on it is checkered, I think, at best. I've always started out with a natural suspicion of white-collar professionals trying to charge me a lot of money. And I've come across a lot of readers on Homebuilding and Renovating who've spent, way over 50, sometimes in excess of £100,000 on design fees alone, and still not been massively happy with the process. Actually, I've kind of come to the view increasingly that what we should be doing is treating design, as something that you need to invest in, and that actually is by far the most important bit of the whole process. And, when I meet self-builders who want to pay a designer less than they pay an electrician or a carpenter or whatever it is, then there's probably something wrong. So Pete, first of all, and I'll come to you, Allan, in a second. Pete, how do you actually kind of, obviously you've got an element of what you think you'd like to charge people and what you think's fair, but, how do you come to a kind of fee proposal? Is it a question of how many hours you think you might be wanting to spend with it? And how do you know that from the start?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I get asked every day, really. So the fees we charge are bespoke. They're based on the client. They're based on the project. We do a very quick calculation of a build cost of maybe, circa £2,000 a square metre. We look at the size of the building. We look at the objectives for the projects. So I'd say on a typical 250 square metre house, a build cost of perhaps $500,000. Our fees on that would typically be between 2 and 4% of the overall build cost. And our fees are always, certainly typically, always less than the client is perhaps spending on their patio or on their turf or their plants. You know, you have to put that in perspective with clients very early on, because historically there was little value put in design. I mean, thankfully now, again, thanks to guys like yourself and the magazine and Allan, there's a much better appreciation. So we are fighting less and less on fees. Although I'm fairly old-fashioned, it's not about fees necessarily for me. It's about delivering an amazing project for the client, you know, because I love doing what I do, and Allan's the same, and his team are the same. So fees are necessary, but I think they're comparable, you know, with everything else. So you say we're less than the electrician, we're less than the plumber, etc., etc.
Yeah, and when you put it like that, it's quite good value, isn't it? Is that, Allan, is that how you approach it too?
Yeah, I mean, we take a detailed brief from the client. We do a free 30, 40, an hour consultation with them to work out what they want, which is now done obviously via Zoom or whatever remotely. And we work out what the fees are. We differ from most architects where we give a fixed cost, because I think it's really important in self-build that you get as many fixed costs up front. And we give that in a breakdown of all the different stages that they need. And because we're a chartered practice, they're only really agreeing to the first stage. So actually they've got a good bit of security that if the circumstances change in their personal life, or they don't like us, or we don't get on, that we both have a get out. And that's really important. And we have an indication of our fees online. I think it's really important that it's something that people, certainly in professional circumstances, they shy away from actually giving people that vital bit of information. But it's really important that when people are looking at things online, that they've got all the information there, that they can say, well, actually these guys this is how much it's going to cost. We're comparable with other sort of high-end architectural practices that do what we do. But it's about, we always try and share or guide our clients that it's about the value. It's not about that cost. It's what we are going to give you over 18 months. And it's a lot of hours. And if you're going for something cheaper, which is a horrible word, it should never be used, but if you're going for a cheaper practice or designs-led service or whatever it's going to be, all that you're doing is reducing the time that they're going to spend on your project, and you're going to get less of a service, and it will cost you far more in the long run.
I think that's a really wise kind of conclusion to draw, actually, and there's definitely a value to design. I think because it's not mortgageable, I think people really sort of struggle to pay for it. I think that's the issue with it. You know, if it could be kind of banded up into the overall build cost and portioned out as electrics or carpentry is, then I think people would find it a lot easier to swallow. But because it's cash at the start, effectively, that's where it becomes a bit of a difficult issue. So just to kind of finish up, you know, I think just in terms of tips for people working with designers, and I think, you know, the issue of the brief is something that I've struggled with a lot over the years, really, about how much of a brief to give to designers. And I do meet people at the home building shows who effectively have almost drawn the building out and give it to the designer just to kind of finish off for them. And that's kind of it, really. But Pete, first, in terms of the kind of what you'd like from clients and how you work best with a client, you know, without going into detail about exactly what you want from a brief, what kind of outline do you need, and what do you like working with best?
Yeah, I mean, your question, I think, originally was, you know, what should they bring to the first meeting? Well, they should bring themselves. That's, you know, just bring themselves. We have a very relaxing, open conversation. Be open thinking at that first meeting. In terms of setting the brief, you know, it will take 2 to 3 to 4 hours on that initial first meeting, where we get to meet the clients, we get to meet their family, we talk about their objectives and aspirations for a project. At the output from that is really just a very simple, written, detailed brief. I'm not looking for photographs initially, or certainly not looking for clients' drawings. Generally, they do tend to cloud the first meeting. As designers, architects and designers, we like to create from a basic list. So we just capture that, really, and obviously balance that with the budget, as we previously spoke about.
Allan, is that true for you too?
Yeah, I think that most of it, yeah, but I think we're used now to getting a tranche of Pinterest boards, whether it's line drawings on graph paper, Lego models, which I'm a big fan of, paper models, loads of different things to express. And a lot of clients, and a lot of clients now will be spending time on Google SketchUp and actually starting to think about things in their own time, which is really useful. But it doesn't, we always give 2 or 3 options from the start. And we think it's important to be able to give options and ideas. And one of those will invariably be part of what has been given to us. But it's the same things as Pete is saying, is that it's about finding out how they work as a family, who they are, and how the building will relate to that and work with them. That's the key stuff.
Brilliant. Really good advice. So listen, guys, we've come to the end of our time. So thanks so much to Allan Corfield from Allan Corfield Architects and Pete Tonks from PJT Design. As I said at the start, 2 of my favourite all-time house designers. I've come across hundreds at home building and renovating over the years, but I really do believe a good designer shouldn't just combine natural design talent, which these 2 guys have in abundance, but also just a really good understanding of what self-builders need from a customer service and fees perspective and all the things that we just talked about there. So couldn't highlight enough how good these 2 are. There are others, of course, but it's been a pleasure to talk to you both. Appreciate your time. And hopefully you've enjoyed the first of our home design workshops for homeschool from Home Building and Renovating. And hopefully you'll be able to use some of the things you've learned today in the houses that you've designed in the future. So thanks for listening, and call again soon.